Hi, everyone. Welcome to Café IBTTA. I'm Pat Jones. My guest today is Emanuela Stocchi. Emma is the Director of International Affairs for ISCAT, the Italian Association of Toll Highway Concessionaire Companies. In this role, she manages the association's contacts with EU institutions and other European and international organizations in the transportation sector. Before her current role, Emma worked in Brussels for 8 years with AISCAT, the European Association of Operators of Toll Road Infrastructures, gaining a comprehensive knowledge of public affairs and expanding her EU and international network in the transportation arena. Emma has served on the IBTTA Board of Directors and served as IBTTA President in 2017. She was elected to be an honorary member of IBTTA in 2018. Emma, welcome to Café IBTTA. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you, Pat. Good morning. It's great for me to be here with you all.
Well, it is Café IBTTA, and I'm drinking coffee from my special Ohio Turnpike mug, thanks to Farzan Ahmed, Lauren Hakis, and the entire team at Ohio Turnpike for this wonderful mug. Thank you very much. Well, we are taking your questions. Use the chat function on your screen to ask questions at any time. We will get to them in due course. And please set your chat function to all panelists and attendees. Well, Emma, let's talk about you, your expertise. You're known as an expert in EU legislation and policies. And as I mentioned in your introduction, you spent 8 years in Brussels working for AISCAT. Tell us about your time in Brussels and what that was like.
Yes, with great pleasure. Thank you so much, Pat, first of all, for this great introduction and especially for this question. You know me very well, and you know how much I like to talk about my European and Brussels experience. As you correctly said, I spent 8 years of my life in Brussels, in the heart of the European Union. It was a great chapter of my professional and personal life. Also because I was there in the mid-90s, so in a very important period of the history of the European Union. It happened after my degree on political sciences and then the master on the EU legislation and policies. I arrived in Brussels in the mid-90s, and at that time, lots of new initiatives were taking place, and the EU institutions were shaping the main political orientations that affected also our transportation sector. You have to consider that from 96 more or less to 2000, 2001, the EU finalized the process of integration of its member states, laying down the foundation of what it is called the EU internal market, this unique internal and free market in which transportation, and mainly road transportation, played at that time, and it still play a key and pivotal role, mainly in ensuring the application, the deployment of one of the most important principles of the European Union Treaty, which is the freedom of movement, of circulation of goods, passengers, people, of working in other countries, of providing services all across Europe without borders. So this was a great political achievement for the European Union, and since then, transportation was considered a key tool to ensure this freedom for citizens and companies. And I want to say something. I remember my first year in Brussels. You know, I wanted to absorb all these international flavors to understand the real functioning of the European Union, because so far for me, it was just, I had just an academic university background on that. So I was spending all the day from early morning to the evening at the European Parliament, and we have been together but a few years ago in Brussels there. And I wanted to attend workshops to meet people, not only on transportation, but also on other policies of the European Union. And I understood immediately this holistic approach. So all the sectors, all the, if you want, all the policies and the industrial sectors were related and connected one to another one to shape this united, this view of a united Europe. And this holistic approach was also present in the daily life in Brussels. You know, in Brussels, you never feel alone. I was there coming from the Mediterranean country, you know, a young girl without mama, without family, without my hometown. But then you are immediately included in a wider perspective with people from different countries, culture. And I think it was very educational to me because you listen to other people, languages, so it's a multicultural, multilingual environment. And also I think that you overcome the differences. It happened more than 20 years ago, but I think it's very actual. You have to listen to the others to be part also to improve your skill, your competence. And I think that the negotiation, the compromise procedure, which is a political practice very used in Brussels for the European Union policies and also in the professional environment, is really an added value, a real quality to me. It can be seen as a weakness, but it is not. On the contrary, it's the openness to other opinions, to other points of view. And I think it's really very educational. So probably I had already this inclusive and collegial temper and character, but I think that if I am the woman of today, personally and professionally, it is also thanks to my Brussels experience, which remains a fundamental part of my background.
You know, you talk about listening and how it's a strength and not a weakness. And I think that's a very powerful message that you can deliver to people all over the world, especially in this very politically charged environment in which everybody seems to be trying to make their point and speaking louder and over people. But there's so much that we can learn by listening and trying not to constantly advance our own point of view. I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate you're talking about no mama, you know, no mama in Brussels. That can be a challenging thing, not to have your family. So you return to mama, you return to Roma, and to work for ISCAT. So, you know, I'm thinking that many Americans know very little about the road concession system in Italy, how it works, its strengths and weaknesses, when it started, 1922. What do you see as some of the main differences between the road transportation system in Italy and those that you've observed in the United States through IBTTA? Operations, finance, funding, technology. What are some of those differences?
Well, yes, as you correctly said, Italy was the pioneer in this concession system. The first toll highway managed through a concession contract was the Milano-Laghi in the early 20s, so almost a century ago. And it was created, so at that time, the Kingdom of Italy, we were not a republic, it was a kingdom, decided to award this concession contract to a company, the Società Anonima Autostrade at that time, to connect the metropolitan area of Milano to the cities of Como and Varese with the lakes. This is what called Milano Laghi, so the lakes of Como and Lago Maggiore, which were areas very important for the trade and also for touristic reasons, and they are still today. And this was the first example of the concession contract between a grantor, so the state, and the private company, the concessionaire. And then it was applied in Italy for the rest of the network, as well as in Europe. Yesterday, we had this great opportunity to attend the IBTTA webinar on the value of the concessions all around the world. And we learn a lot from Europe, from Spain, from France, from Bruno and Christophe, from our colleagues. So I think I also noticed yesterday in the Q&A session, in the chat function of Zoom, that this issue, this difference now between US and Europe was raised. I think that mainly, well, it is an historical tradition for Italy and for Europe. So we are used to the concession contract. And we have to take into account that we are talking about a contract. So between two entities, the state, can be the state or an administration, a regional authority, for instance, and the private concessionaire. And as Bruno yesterday highlighted, the concessionaire is not owner of the infrastructure, but according to the conditions of the contract with rights and obligations, the concessionaire can operate, maintain, improve the infrastructure. And of course, in the contract, we have also some important elements. Christophe was underlining that it applies in Italy, like in France, in Spain, and in other European countries, the quality parameters, and also the verification, the monitoring, the control by the states to see if investments have been made, if these quality indicators for the users have been applied. So there is always a balance and a cooperation between the two parties. This is also, probably it's also another difference is that a few years ago, I'm talking about difference between US and Europe, a few years ago, the concessions in general and the P3s were just left to the national country, not according to the legislation, regulation, etc. Few years ago, and this I come back to my European experience, the European Union decided to legiferate on that. So we have a political orientation for the P3s, and then a directive, so legislative act for concession, with all the elements to be applied to these contracts. Of course, it is also to be taken into account what it was also discussed yesterday, that concession is also a tool not only for the physical infrastructure, but also for the future mobility needs, because the concession can fund also new mobility aspects like the managed lanes that we don't have developed in Europe, reserved lanes, digital mobility, free flow tolling, you know. So I think it's a sort of a flexible tool that can be used, and also it is an equal and fair tool because of course the burden is not on the whole citizen, on the taxpayers, but on the users. So the user payer principle is applied, and we also highlighted that a few years ago in a joint declaration with between AISCAT and IBTTA.
You're exactly right that there is a lot of harmony between AISCAT and IBTTA in the belief and the strong support for the user pays principle. And we're, you know, in the US, sort of in the beginning experimenting phase of introducing more concessionaires as are happening in Europe, but we still have a ways to go, I think, to catch up. Here's a question along these lines from Andrew Bunn. He says, yesterday, the EU made the unprecedented decision to issue debt/grants en masse as part of their COVID recovery package. Do you see this as a repeatable measure that could affect transportation funding Europe-wide in the future? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Actually, yesterday it was really a historical European Council. You know, it lasted 4 days of negotiation. We come back to what I said, the compromise and the negotiation. And European Union, all the states decided all together to take this decision, so to affect a relevant budget to the, you know, of course, to face the COVID impact. And the relevant part will be affected to infrastructure. So what I see in the future now, the European Union is working a lot on the new mobility trends, on the application of electrical mobility, of digital mobility. So we need to monitor as road operators the application of this decision, of this great budget, and to develop project, co-funded project with the European Union to help our infrastructure and to help our users and citizens to get a better mobility.
All right, let's turn to the issue of safety and sustainability. You have a significant leadership role in AISCAT as chair of the Permanent Committee on Road Safety, Marketing, and Sustainability. What motivated you to take this role? And talk to us about sustainability and the European Green Deal.
Mm-hmm. Yes, actually, I had the honor to receive from my long life friend and colleague Malika Seddi the testimony of this permanent committee of AISCAT on road safety, marketing, and sustainability. Just quickly, for those who are not familiar with AISCAT, ASCAT functions through the activity of different committees, likewise IBTTA. So we have committees on tolling and concession, on ITS technology, on statistics. And the committee I'm chairing is focusing on relevant issues for, I would say, the users, the customers. So road safety, marketing, and communication. And then we added recently the issue of sustainability, because of course we are following all these new trends in new mobility, in sustainable mobility. And also we have to monitor very closely as European association also to help our single member states. What you mentioned, Pat, the European Green Deal, this document, which was adopted, it's the most important and the first political document adopted by the newly elected European Commission in November 2019, aimed at making Europe in 30 years, more or less, by 2050, a carbon-free continent, so with low emissions, green, with a new kind of mobility. And this is of course, a summary of political orientation, but it is very important that for the first time, this document has been adopted to be applied in all the sectors of the European Union, in all the industrial sectors. So whatever decision is taken has to take into account the political principle of the European Green Deal. And in the months to come, of course, now there is this emergency of COVID, and now the European Council is focused on that, as it was said in one of the questions. We know that new legislation, new proposals for legislation will be presented by the European Commission in the field of electrical mobility, of digital mobility, and also on the alternative fuels infrastructure, which is affecting a lot our operators. So as ASECAP, as COPER2, and as association, we are trying to find a common position, of course, to defend our interests, but once again, to be open and to listen, because, you know, sometimes in our sector, we just are conservative. Now we want to operate our infrastructure, to have our garden, I would say. But now, you know, the technology is really fast. We know that lots of evolutions are taking place in this field. So we need to interact with the energy sector, with the automotive, even, you know, with all these new actors in the connected automated vehicles. We cannot be behind, we cannot be delayed, you know. So we have to interact, and we have, I think, the resources and we have the skills to have a voice and to be active also in these fields. So with the COPER2, we are trying to do that under a political level. And then, of course, we have a sort of, you know, activity of benchmarking activity, for instance, on the road safety regulations, on the road marking and signs, so all the elements related to the operation. And we also promoted, thanks to Malika a few years ago, a marketing group, because we think that we have to collect people working in a marketing sector, because they are the one closer, you know, to the users, so they can bring ideas, initiatives, and we can try to improve the performance of our operators.
Safety and sustainability, two really big topics that are at the top of the agenda in the transportation sector. Emma, let's turn to the issue of interoperability. You know that just in the last couple of weeks, there was a big announcement here in the United States about Florida and Georgia joining the E-ZPass group, which is going to create a complete zone of interoperability up and down the East Coast. But we have a question from Ed Regan related to this. He's asking, talk about how Europe is doing in its attempt to achieve EU toll interoperability across the nations. In the US, we seem to be closing in on the goal of nationwide interoperability, but it may be an even bigger challenge for the nations of Europe. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question coming from Ed. Actually, if I see differences between the US and Europe related to concessions, now we say that we have a more developed tradition in that. I see lots of similarities in the interoperability of electronic tool collection. I remember several boards of IBTTA, you know, several meetings in the last 10 years, we focused on that. So it was also really educational and important to me, you know, to learn how it was functioning and developing in the US. We have lots of similarities because we started with the same regional approach, the regional hubs, no? In the US, the Easy Pass, SunPass, Peach Pass, etc. And we had also a regional project with a coordination of ASACAP. I think we spoke about that several times in IBTTA meetings. The Regional European Electronic Tolling Service, which started with 7 member states of the European Union, with the objective, of course, to have the whole European coverage of EETS, of European Electronic Toll Service. Right now, it is almost achieved, and there is also, ASACAP has played, I think, a very important role, similar to the one of IBTTA, because IBTTA was a sort of a coordinating and information body, as well as ASACAP. Of course, the market gives the rules of the deployment of interoperability, but the two associations, I think they played a sort of, you know, of incubator of a coordination body. ASACAP leads an information platform on EETS, so to try to find a balance between the toll chargers and the service provider, the so-called EETS provider. The only thing, probably, the difference I see, once again, is that in the US, if I'm not wrong, there is not a compulsory legislation on that, so a federal legislation, while in Europe, of course, we have a specific directive, so a legislative act on interoperability, and all our national members are obliged to apply this legislation with all the elements and, of course, aspects to be respected.
Emma, we have a question from your good friend and fellow board member, Randy Cole, who used to serve with the Ohio Turnpike and on the IBTTA board. And he says, so happy you've weathered the COVID-19 storm. Currently, we seem to have 2 different tides: restricted travel due to COVID-19 and increased use of virtual technology to collaborate. Politics aside, do you think that across the ocean, the US and Europe seem further apart or closer together on COVID-19?
That's a good question. Well, I think you are completely right, Randy. I mean, it was really a nightmare in the beginning, a sort of revolution, unexpected event. But I think that also thanks to our organization, thanks to ASACAP and thanks to IBTTA, we feel now closer. I think that, and I take this opportunity to congratulate you, Pat, and your staff. You put together, I mean, an amazing program of virtual meetings, webinars, committees. You know, we are always connected every day. And I think that we feel this sense of belonging to the association. So in this aspect, in this field, I think it's, well, I don't say that it was, you know, it's not good, of course, what happened, but the positive outcome is that we feel closer. Also because we had the opportunity to exchange ideas. First of all, ideas on the traffic. Do you remember we exchanged lots of information about the drop of traffic in Italy, in Spain, and France were the first countries, and then it came also in other countries, and also the measures to be taken. So it was good for our operators to understand what it was happening in other countries of the world. And the main concern for everybody, it was to protect, of course, the employees, the user, and to ensure the continuity of the service. This is what we also were talking about, the concept of new mobility in the beginning of this conversation. The main concern, it was to deliver goods, to make people moving, to connect the countries. So I think we had lots of points in common, and it was very good to exchange views with IBTTA. I also had the opportunity to have this exchange with ASCAT, of course, but also with PIARC, with the World Road Association. We had an interesting series of webinars, and we spoke about that we are becoming more customer centric. We have more attention to the users, to our customers, also because of this pandemic.
Emma, thank you so much for those reflections on COVID-19 and some of the things that you've learned from your own experience and there in the transportation sector. Well, I couldn't have you on Café IBTTA without talking about music and singing. You're a musician, and singing has always played a big role in your life, including leading you to the love of your life. Tell us about your love of music and how it affects all aspects of your life.
Thank you, Pat, for asking. Well, actually, I grew up in music because my older brother is a professional violinist, Corrado. And so he taught me how to read music, how to sing. So I was immediately, surrounded by music. And then I started singing in choirs where I met my future husband, Daniele. So we sang together. We had also the opportunity to sing in beautiful concerts with maestro Ennio Morricone, who passed away a few days ago. And I think that music is also an international, global language, no? And especially, you know that I sing also the solo, but I like to sing in the choir because once again, in the choir, you have to listen to the other voice. You need to, to balance, to fine tune with the other voices and to have an harmonized and unified melody. So I think that also the musical experience, it reminds to me the same international experience I had in Brussels to listen to the others and to have a unique and unified result.
Well, Emma, I think, you have, somebody said when you received your honorary membership award that, we all know that you have a beautiful operatic voice, but we feel as though you found your voice in the leadership of IBTTA. And, some of the words that friends use to describe you are charming, elegant, caring, and generous. But what I think of when I think of Emanuela Stocchi and the leadership of IBTTA are a sense of collaboration, collegiality, and continuity. And you always sought ways to bring people together and have them listen to one another and be gracious to one another. It's that key, it's that very key element of listening, of putting your own needs and concerns aside and trying to collaborate. Those three C's: collaboration, collegiality, and continuity. Could you just say a few more words about that in your style of leadership?
Yeah, thank you. But I remember that you said these words in Baltimore, and I was very, very moved. Yes, I think that as in the beginning, probably it's my first of all, it's my temper, but also it was the background experience I had with my studies, and especially in Brussels. So when you overcome the differences, as I said, and you can have a leadership role, not just shouting or being aggressive. Sometimes, our politicians all over the world are like that, and they think to be, the best one. But I think that to be persuasive, assertive, but in a kind way, in an assertive way, I think it's probably the best solution, the best way to address people, and also to address challenges and to find common solutions. This is my belief.
Emma, I'm just going to pause for a moment to make a couple of announcements about future events. Next week, our guest on Café IBTTA is none other than Ed Regan from CDM Smith. Visit ibtta.org/events for all the details and to register for upcoming events, including these. Tomorrow at 11 o'clock Eastern Time, we have a webinar or a meetup, Messaging and Marketing During the Pandemic. You can find that on the website. Next week, July 28th, the Big Data Subcommittee will present Big Data for Better Operations. J.J. Eden, the Executive Director of the North Carolina Turnpike Authority, and Jim Trogdon, former Transportation Secretary of North Carolina, will discuss the big data revolution and how they've used technology to drive business decisions. Also next week, July 30th, we have a meetup, Managing Up, Down, and Across Organizations. It's for professionals at every career stage. It's presented by Mary Abijay and the Mentorship Committee and supported by the IBTTA Women in Tolling Council, the Young Professionals Council, and the Leadership Academy Alumni Association. And before we go, we have a comment about the arts from Chelsea Scheid. She says, "Yay, I love to remind people the importance of the arts, music for life. And even if you're not going to become a professional musician or a professional actor or dancer, those things that you learn in practicing that skill live with you for the rest of your life." Emma, thank you so much for being with us today. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, everybody. Stay safe.
And thank you, IBTTA members. We encourage you to be safe, keep in touch, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.
Ciao.